My parents threw me out at 8 years old. Now I run a center for the kids they'd never welcome. They called me a failure, hit me, and left me on the street with a suitcase. Now they're begging me to come home while I run a thriving nonprofit for kids like me with the brother they used to worship by my side. They built a house of perfection, so I built a home of purpose. My name's Rachel Monroe, and I'm 23 now, but what I'm about to share began when I was just 8 years old. I've spent most of my life trying to pretend that night never happened, but no matter how hard I try, I can't forget it. It was the night everything I thought I knew about family shattered. I grew up in a spotless, cold house in Portland, Oregon, the kind of place that looked more like a showroom than a home. My parents, Daniel and Christine Monroe, were both high-powered attorneys, obsessed with appearances, control, and results. They weren't the warm, nurturing type. In fact, the only time they looked at me with anything resembling emotion was when they were disappointed. My younger brother Tyler was their shining star. He was smart, charming, and naturally gifted at everything he did. Anytime he brought home an A, it was like the 4th of July in our living room. Cheers, hugs, maybe even a dinner out. When I brought home a B, my mom would look at me like I just disgraced the family name. My dad would barely even speak. I was always the one who needed to do better, to try harder, while Tyler got all the praise and help money could buy. I told myself if I just worked harder, if I just made them proud one time, they'd look at me the way they looked at him. I'd spend hours on my homework, push myself until I could barely keep my eyes open, but no matter what I did, it was never enough. That winter evening, I came home from school with a heavy backpack and an even heavier heart. I had taken a math test I'd studied for all week, hoping I could finally impress them. I got a C+. As soon as I stepped inside, I heard them in the living room, loud, angry, and disgusted. I froze in the hallway, clutching that test paper like it was made of glass. "She's hopeless," my mom snapped. "We've given her every advantage and she still lets us down." My dad's voice was even colder. "We tried to mold her into something decent, but she just doesn't have it in her. She's not meant for success." My chest tightened so hard I could barely breathe. They weren't talking about some stranger, they were talking about me. Again. "She's lazy," my dad added like a final nail in my coffin. "She'll never rise to our level. She's not the kind of daughter we can be proud of." Tears filled my eyes, but I didn't move. I wanted to run, to scream, to ask why I was never enough, but I just stood there frozen in place. And then I heard something that made my blood go cold. "Maybe it's time she leaves," my mom said, like she was talking about returning a pair of shoes that didn't fit. For a second, I thought I misheard her. I was 8. She couldn't have meant that. But she did. After dinner, they called me into the living room. My dad sat stiffly on the couch, arms crossed like he was in court. My mom stood behind him, her face blank. Tyler was nowhere to be seen. He never had to witness these things. "Rachel," my dad said flatly, "we've talked, and we've reached a point where we're done trying. You're not meeting our expectations." My voice came out like a whisper. "Trying what?" My mom didn't even blink. "Trying to fix you. If you can't live up to what we expect, maybe you don't belong here." My whole body went cold. Where would I go?" I asked, barely able to get the words out. My dad didn't flinch. "Figure it out." Something inside me cracked. "Please," I begged, stepping forward. "I'll do better. I promise. Just let me stay." I reached for my mom's hand. She punched me. A sharp fist to the face. It happened so fast I couldn't react. My head jerked to the side and I fell back, hitting the floor hard. The sting exploded across my cheek and spread through my skull. I held my face in disbelief, staring up at her, waiting for something, remorse, hesitation, anything, but there was nothing. "Get out," she said coldly. I turned to my dad. Nothing. He wouldn't even look at me. That was the moment I stopped being their daughter. I picked myself up, stumbled to my room, and threw what little I could into a tiny suitcase, sweaters, socks, a toothbrush. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay. My hands trembled as I zipped the bag and looked around my room one last time. It had never really felt like mine. The walls were bare except for some old crayon drawings. The bed I'd slept in for years suddenly felt like it belonged to someone else. I walked to the front door, backpack on one shoulder, suitcase in my hand. My mom stood there waiting, arms crossed like she was sending off a stranger. My dad didn't even look up from his paper. Tyler never came out. I looked at them, desperately hoping they changed their minds. That one of them would say, "Wait. Don't go." But no one did. My mom opened the door and said one word. "Leave." The door slammed behind me and I was alone. The cold night air bit through my hoodie. I walked down the steps, unsure where to go, clutching my suitcase and trying not to cry. I wandered through the streets of Portland like a ghost. The streetlights buzzed above me, cars passed in the distance, laughter spilled from cozy homes I couldn't enter. I kept walking, tears silently falling down my cheeks. My face throbbed from where she hit me. My stomach growled. I hadn't eaten since dinner, and even then I barely touched it. I wanted to lie down on the sidewalk and disappear. And then, just when I thought I couldn't keep going, I heard someone call my name. I stood beneath a flickering street lamp, arms wrapped tightly around my small frame, trying to stay warm. My feet ached from walking, my stomach twisted with hunger, and the sting from my mother's punch pulsed on my cheek like a reminder that none of it had been a dream. I kept thinking, maybe I should go back. Maybe if I apologized again or cried harder, they'd let me in. But then I remembered the look in their eyes. They hadn't just been angry. They had been done. I was out, unwanted, and completely on my own. I didn't know where I was heading. I just kept walking, each step slower than the last. The neighborhood felt foreign now, like I'd been dropped into a world that didn't know my name. I felt like a ghost, see-through, drifting, already forgotten. Just as my legs started to give out beneath me, I heard it. Rachel? I froze. My heart thumped so hard I thought it might burst. That voice. I turned around, unsure if I was imagining things, and there she was. A woman stepped into the glow of the street lamp, her eyes scanning my face, locking onto the red mark on my cheek and the little suitcase dragging behind me. "Oh my God, Rachel," she gasped, rushing toward me. It was my Aunt Valerie, my mom's younger sister. I hadn't seen her in a while. She wasn't close to my parents. They said she was dramatic, too emotional, too soft. But in that moment, her presence felt like someone had just reached into the darkness and pulled me out. I tried to speak, but the words didn't come. How could I explain what had happened? How could I tell her that my mom had punched me, that my dad had watched without saying a word, that they told me to figure it out like I was a problem they were done solving? Before I could open my mouth, she closed the distance and wrapped her arms around me. And that was it. That was the moment the dam broke. I didn't cry when they threw me out. I didn't cry when I packed or walked for hours through the cold. But standing there in my aunt's arms, I fell apart. The sobs came out in heavy waves, pouring from a place so deep I didn't even know it existed. She held me tighter, saying nothing, just rubbing my back and letting me cry. It was the first real hug I could remember in years. Not a side hug or a quick pat on the shoulder. This was someone holding me like I mattered, like I deserved to be protected. After a while, my sobs quieted and she stepped back, brushing my hair away from my face. Her eyes were dark with concern and something else rage. "Did someone hit you?" she asked, her voice tight. I hesitated, but there was no point in lying. "My mom," I whispered. "She hit me and then, they told me to leave." Valerie stared at me for a second, her jaw clenched, like she was trying to keep herself from storming over there and raising hell. But instead, she took a deep breath, reached down, grabbed my suitcase and said, "Come with me. You're safe now. I promise." She held out her hand. I took it. And for the first time that night, I didn't feel completely alone. We walked through the quiet streets toward her apartment, my legs barely keeping up, but I didn't care. Her grip was firm, steady, and I followed it like it was the only light in the dark. When we got to her building, she unlocked the door and led me inside. Her apartment wasn't fancy, but it felt more like home in 1 second than my parents' mansion ever had. Warm blankets were tossed over the back of a couch. Pictures of family, some even of me when I was little, hung on the walls, and the soft scent of vanilla candles lingered in the air. She led me to the kitchen and sat me down at the table. "You look exhausted," she said gently, brushing my hair again. "Just sit. I'll make something warm." I didn't argue. My body was too drained. I sat there, my backpack on the floor, eyes blinking slowly as she moved around the kitchen like she already knew exactly what I needed. She poured a glass of water, reheated some soup, and placed it in front of me without asking a single question. "Eat first," she said softly. "Then we'll talk." I didn't even realize how hungry I was until the first spoonful hit my mouth. It was like warmth flooded me from the inside out. I finished the whole bowl in minutes, and when I looked up, she was sitting across from me, watching patiently, hands folded on the table. "Tell me everything," she said. I looked down, trying to figure out where to even begin. "They never wanted me," I said finally, my voice small. "No matter what I did, it wasn't enough. Tyler, he was their favorite. I was just extra." She didn't interrupt. She just listened. I told her about the test, the C+, the way they talked about me like I was a stain on the carpet they couldn't scrub out. I touched the side of my face where my mom had hit me. She punched me, I whispered. Then they told me to leave. For a long moment, the room was silent. Valerie's hands clenched on the table, her eyes glistening but fierce. I always knew they were cold, she said finally, her voice shaking, but this is beyond anything I imagined. My throat tightened again, but this time I wasn't just sad, I was angry. How could they do this to me? How could they sleep at night knowing their daughter was out there with a suitcase and nowhere to go? Valerie reached across the table and grabbed my hand. Rachel, listen to me. You are not a mistake. You're not a failure. You're strong and you're smart and you didn't deserve any of this. Her words hit me harder than I expected. I'd spent my whole life trying to earn love that was never meant for me. Sitting here in this warm kitchen, I realized I didn't have to chase that anymore. They'd made their choice. Now I'd make mine. I wasn't going back. That night, I slept in her guest room. The door didn't creak with quiet arguments, the air wasn't heavy with tension, and for the first time in forever I didn't feel like I was holding my breath. Valerie's hallway light spilled gently into the room, and the blanket she tucked around me felt like armor. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was safe. The morning after I moved in with Aunt Valerie felt like stepping into an entirely different world. Sunlight poured in through the curtains of the guest room, and for a moment I lay there still, afraid it had all been a dream, that any second I'd hear my parents calling for me, or worse, yelling again. But then I heard Valerie humming in the kitchen, the soft clinking of dishes and the smell of scrambled eggs and toast drifted into the room. No one was rushing. No tension filled the air. No pressure sat heavy on my chest. Just the kind of peaceful morning I didn't even realize families could have. I sat at her tiny kitchen table, wearing one of her oversized t-shirts because I hadn't packed much, and she placed a plate in front of me like it was the most natural thing in the world. You can stay as long as you need to, she said between sips of her coffee, her tone casual but certain. I hesitated, unsure if she meant it or if this kindness would expire like everything else in my life seemed to. I don't want to be a burden, I muttered, barely looking up from my toast. Valerie snorted like I just told her aliens were real. Rachel, you are not a burden. You're my niece. Your family. And for the record, you were never the problem. They were. Her words didn't just land, they sank, deep and slow, loosening something in my chest I hadn't even noticed was tied up. I'd spent so long trying to be perfect, to prove I was worthy of a family that never saw me. And now here was someone offering me love without conditions, without asking me to earn it. It didn't make sense at first. I kept expecting it to fall apart. But it didn't. With Valerie's help, I transferred schools a week later. It was a small public school a few blocks away. Nothing fancy, nothing cold or intimidating, just a regular place with kids who didn't know me, teachers who didn't glare at me like I was wasting their time, and hallways that didn't echo with the pressure to be someone I wasn't. The first few days were hard. I flinched when teachers raised their voices, even if it wasn't directed at me. I kept my head down and my answers short, unsure if people could sense how broken I felt inside. But no one looked at me the way my parents used to, not like I was an embarrassment, not like I was a project that needed fixing. Valerie walked me to school for the first few days. She'd pack me a sandwich and write a little note on a napkin, like, "You've got this," or "One test doesn't define you." I kept those notes tucked inside my pencil case like they were gold. Slowly, something started to change. I studied not because I wanted to impress anyone, but because I was curious again. I raised my hand in class, cautiously at first, then with a bit more confidence. I even started making friends, not many, just a couple of girls who liked the same books and TV shows I did. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was constantly competing for a place at the table. Valerie never hovered, but she was always there when I needed her. She'd ask how my day went, and actually listen to the answer. She'd celebrate my small wins, an improved grade, a drawing I was proud of, even just surviving a tough Monday. And every time I doubted myself, she reminded me that I didn't have to be perfect to be worthy of love. I still had my moments. Some nights I'd wake up from nightmares where I was back in my old house, being told to pack again to get out. I'd lie there in the dark, heart racing, until I remembered where I was, that I wasn't there anymore, that I was safe now. On those nights, Valerie never asked questions. She'd just bring me a cup of warm tea, sit on the edge of my bed, and wait until I fell asleep again. She never pushed me to talk about it unless I wanted to. That freedom, that gentleness, it was all so new. It made me wonder how different things could have been if she'd raised me from the beginning. I still thought about Tyler sometimes. I wondered if he noticed I was gone. We hadn't spoken since that night, and I didn't expect to hear from him. He was still their golden boy, still trying to live up to their impossible standards. I knew that life too well. But for me, it was finally over. And with every passing week, that truth became more real. I wasn't the girl begging to be loved anymore. I was building something new. I was learning how to breathe, how to trust, how to believe that maybe, just maybe, I was enough. It had been almost 4 years since I'd spoken to my brother. His name was now Aaron in my mind, no longer the flawless Tyler my parents worshipped, just Aaron, the boy I used to play with before everything got complicated. After I moved in with Aunt Valerie and started over, I told myself I was done with the past. I buried the memories of that cold house, the slammed doors, the silence that followed every imperfect grade. I didn't look back. I focused on school, on healing, on finding out who I really was when I wasn't chasing someone else's approval. But sometimes, when I was lying in bed late at night, I'd still wonder about him. Did he miss me? Did he even care that I was gone? Did he ever fight for me after they threw me out? Or was he too busy living up to their perfect expectations? Then one evening, everything shifted. I was sitting cross-legged on the couch, half focused on a biology worksheet, when my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen and froze. Aaron Monroe. I hadn't seen that name in what felt like a lifetime. My thumb hovered above the message, pulse quickening. I wanted to ignore it, to pretend that part of my life didn't exist anymore, but curiosity got the better of me. I opened it. Hey, can we talk? That was it. 5 words. But they carried the weight of everything unsaid, everything broken. I stared at the screen for what felt like forever, 100 feelings crashing into me at once. Anger, confusion, fear, and something I didn't expect, hope. Part of me wanted to block the number. The other part, the part that still remembered sharing late-night cereal and backyard secrets with my brother, wanted to know what he had to say. I typed back slowly. Yeah. What's going on? His reply came almost instantly. I need to get out of here. Can we meet? Please. There was no punctuation, no polish. Just a desperate string of words from someone I never thought I'd hear desperation from. I told him to meet me at a quiet coffee shop near Valerie's apartment. 1 hour later, I was sitting in the corner booth, fingers wrapped around a mug of hot cocoa I hadn't touched. My stomach was in knots. When he walked in, I barely recognized him. The confident, picture-perfect kid my parents had molded was gone. In his place was a tall, tired-looking teenager with dark circles under his eyes and hunched shoulders. He slid into the seat across from me, and for a few moments, neither of us spoke. We just sat there, the hum of coffee machines and soft indie music filling the silence between us. Finally, he looked up. They're choking me, Ratch. His voice cracked slightly when he said my name. It was the first time I'd heard it in years. I told them I wanted to go to art school, like a real performing arts program. I want to write music. And they just lost it. Said I was throwing away my future. That I was being selfish. I blinked, stunned. I thought you wanted to be a lawyer. He let out a humorless laugh. That's what they wanted. I just went along with it. Because if I didn't, I knew they'd turn on me the way they did with you. Hearing him say that, out loud, felt like the air got sucked out of the room. For the first time, I saw him not as the golden child, but as another prisoner in the same perfect house. He hadn't been free. He'd just been surviving differently. I can't do it anymore, he whispered. Every day I wake up feeling like I have to be flawless or I'll disappear. I don't even know who I am. I need out. I leaned back in my seat, staring at him, my chest tight. He was unraveling right in front of me, and all I could think was, I've been there. I reached for my mug and took a slow sip before speaking. You don't owe them your life, Aaron. You don't have to follow their path. If you want to get out, you can. I did. He shook his head. It's not that simple. I still live there. They pay for everything, my school, my clothes, my food. If I leave, I have nothing. I understood that fear. I had been lucky. Valerie had opened her arms in her home without hesitation. Aaron had no one but me. I took a breath, staring him in the eye. Then come stay with us. With me and Val. If you're serious about this, I'll help you figure it out. You don't have to do it alone. He blinked, visibly stunned. You do that? Yeah, I said, nodding. Of course I would. His eyes watered slightly, but he looked away, jaw tightening. For a long while he just sat there, knuckles white against the edge of the table. Then he nodded once. Okay. And just like that, something shifted. For years, I thought he had everything I didn't. I thought he was the chosen one, the golden boy who got the love I'd never earned. But now I saw the truth. He wasn't lucky. He was trapped. Just like I had been. The only difference was that I'd already found the way out. Now it was his turn. The night Aaron left our parents' house felt like holding my breath for hours. He'd messaged me earlier in the day telling me he was going to do it, that he was finally ready to leave. I tried to keep my voice steady when I told Aunt Valerie, but the truth was I was a wreck inside. We knew they wouldn't let him go quietly. We knew there would be yelling, threats, guilt. That house didn't let go of control without a fight. Valerie parked her car a few houses down from where we'd both grown up, engine off, windows rolled down just enough to hear if things went sideways. I sat in the passenger seat staring down that street, the one I'd walked away from all those years ago, my heart hammering like it used to when I got a C+ or forgot to say, thank you, in just the right tone. Valerie sat stiffly behind the wheel, her fingers tapping against the steering wheel in tight, anxious bursts. Are you sure he's ready for this? She asked, not looking at me. He has to be, I whispered. And deep down, I believed that. He wasn't doing this for show. He was breaking out of the cage he'd been raised in, the same one I'd been thrown out of. Finally, after what felt like a lifetime, the front door creaked open. Aaron stepped out, backpack slung over one shoulder, a small duffel bag in hand. His movements were tight, tense, like he was bracing for impact. And sure enough, behind him came our parents, Daniel and Christine, still as composed and ice-cold as ever, standing in the doorway like statues. Even from a distance, I could see the fury etched into my father's clenched jaw, the disappointment stretched across my mother's perfectly powdered face. If you walk out that door, Aaron, my dad called out, voice sharp and warning, you are not welcome back. Do you understand me? Aaron paused at the top of the steps. I could almost feel the weight of years pressing down on him, expectations, perfection, all the hollow praise he'd been fed in exchange for obedience. He stood still, staring straight ahead, then slowly walked down the steps without turning around. Then I'm not coming back, he said, loud enough for them to hear, but steady and sure. My mother scoffed behind him. You're making a mistake. You are nothing without us. I flinched. Those same words had been thrown at me once too, meant to cut deep enough to make me crawl back. But Aaron didn't flinch. He stopped at the bottom of the driveway, turned back just once and said, no, I was nothing with you. And then he walked toward our car. Valerie didn't wait. The second he climbed into the back seat, she turned the key and pulled away from the curb like she was escaping a prison. Aaron sat in the back, silent at first, just staring out the window. I looked back at him and expected to see regret, fear, maybe even second thoughts, but instead, he just exhaled, like he'd been holding his breath for too many years. For the first time in his life, he looked free. That night, he slept in the same guest room I once did, the one that had become my safe space, my sanctuary. He didn't say much. He unpacked quietly, folded his clothes into the drawers Valerie cleared out for him, and stood by the window for a long time, just watching the city lights blink against the dark. We didn't force conversation. We gave him space. I knew too well what that kind of night felt like, when your entire world tilts and you're suddenly somewhere new, unsure whether to feel relief or grief or both. The next morning we sat around the kitchen table eating waffles, none of us rushing to say anything heavy. But as the days passed, Aaron began to open up. Slowly, piece by piece, the cracks in his golden boy image began to show. He told me about the panic attacks he hid during test weeks, about pretending to be excited about pre-law programs, about how lonely it felt to be perfect all the time. I told him my side, the years I spent thinking he had everything while I had nothing, and how it almost broke me trying to earn love that wasn't meant for me. We cried one night, both of us, sitting on the floor of the living room surrounded by takeout boxes and childhood photos Valerie had saved. We weren't the enemies our parents made us out to be. We were survivors of the same storm, just caught in different corners of the house. Music brought him back to life. The second week he was with us, he pulled out a dusty old guitar from his duffel bag and began playing again, chords and melodies he used to write in secret, back when our parents told him it was a waste of time. Valerie sat on the couch with a smile that never left her face while he played, nodding to the rhythm, tapping her foot, cheering softly at the end of each song. You're good, she told him. No, really good. And for the first time in a long time he believed it. We spent hours talking about what he wanted to do next, schools that would support his creativity, scholarships, part-time jobs. He had options now. Real ones. And he had people who supported him no matter what he chose. The weight of their expectations slowly lifted off his shoulders with every decision he made for himself. And me? I was finally seeing my brother not as the boy who got everything I didn't, but as someone who had been aching just like I had. We weren't rivals. We were healing. Together. It started on a quiet Sunday afternoon, the kind where sunlight drifted lazily through the windows and the smell of coffee lingered in the air. Aaron and I were sitting on the floor in the living room, laughing over one of his ridiculous song lyrics about a breakup with a vending machine. It was dumb in the best way, and we couldn't stop cracking up. Aunt Valerie was on the couch nearby, flipping through a magazine but only half paying attention, smiling to herself every time we laughed. Then she looked up, eyes thoughtful, and said, "You know, what if we did something with all of this?" Aaron raised an eyebrow, strumming his guitar lazily. "With my heartbreak ballad about vending machine snacks?" She chuckled. "No, I mean with everything we've been through, all the stuff you two survived. You both know what it's like to grow up thinking you're not enough. What if we built something for kids like that?" I sat up a little straighter, her words sinking in. "Like what?" "Therapy." Valerie shook her head, her eyes lighting up with the kind of spark she got when she believed in something with her whole heart. "No, like a place, a real place. A community center for kids and teens who feel forgotten or pushed aside by their families. Somewhere safe, where they can be themselves without having to earn it." The idea hit me like a soft wave, gentle but powerful. I thought back to who I used to be. That little girl wandering the streets with a swollen cheek and nowhere to go, aching for someone to see her. I imagined what it would have meant to have a space like that back then. A place with open doors, soft lights, music playing, and people who didn't look through you but saw you. Aaron sat up, his guitar forgotten in his lap. "We could have music classes," he said, eyes brightening. "Songwriting workshops, jam sessions, stuff I never got to do because it didn't fit the plan." I nodded, ideas swirling in my head. Art classes, a homework help corner, support groups, just a place to breathe, to exist without judgment. Valerie clapped her hands softly. "Exactly. We could call it something meaningful, something that honors how far you've both come." We tossed around names, scribbling on napkins and notepads until one stuck. The Monroe Center. Not for our parents but for ourselves, reclaiming the name they tried to bury us under. It took months of planning, research, grant applications, and calls with local nonprofits, but the more work we poured in, the more it felt real. Valerie handled the logistics like a pro, drawing on old contacts and working overtime to help us get started. Aaron used his music connections to find other young creatives who wanted to volunteer. I designed flyers, reached out to schools, and helped write the mission statement, every word of it pulled from my own story. We found a small but cozy building near the edge of town. Nothing fancy but full of potential. We painted the walls ourselves, hung up donated art from local kids, and filled the rooms with hand-me-down furniture that somehow felt like treasure once it was cleaned and rearranged. The first time I walked through those doors after we finished setting up, something inside me shifted. This wasn't about proving anything to our parents. It wasn't revenge. It was freedom. It was building the kind of future we wished we'd had. The kind where kids didn't have to wait until they were broken to realize they were worth loving. The day we opened, a handful of teenagers wandered in, some curious, some skeptical, some just looking for a warm place to sit. We greeted every single one with a smile and a simple message, "You belong here." And they stayed. They came back. Word spread, and the Monroe Center began to grow, slowly but steadily. Every guitar chord Aaron played, every sketch pinned to the wall, every whispered, "Thank you," from a kid who finally felt safe, it all mattered. It all meant something. For the first time, our pain had a purpose. It had been years since I heard her voice, and yet the moment I saw the number flash across my screen, my stomach twisted like I was that little girl again, standing in a hallway clutching a C+ test. I was sitting alone in one of the offices at the Monroe Center, reviewing our volunteer schedule for the month, when my phone lit up with a number I hadn't saved but could never forget. I stared at it, debating whether to decline or let it go to voicemail, but something in me needed to hear it, to know for sure. I answered. "Hello." A long pause. Then came the voice I once begged to love me. "Rachel," she said, crisp and controlled like always. It was my mother. I I sat back in the chair, phone pressed to my ear but not saying anything, just letting the silence answer for me. "We need to talk," she said finally. I clenched my jaw. "No, we really don't." She exhaled sharply, the way she always did when she thought I was being difficult. "Enough with the attitude. Your father and I have been patient, but this little rebellion has gone on long enough." I almost laughed. Rebellion? She thought I'd build an entirely new life just to spite her? "What do you want?" I asked, flat tired. "We've been thinking about the future," she continued, ignoring my tone. "And we believe it's time you come home. This whole community center thing isn't sustainable. You need something real, a career. A proper life." Her words hit me like a cold slap, but not because they hurt. Because they hadn't changed. Not even a little. It was like time had stood still for her while I had lived entire lives since the last time she saw me. "Let me make something very clear," I said, my voice steady. "You stopped being my family the day you hit me and shoved me out the door." The silence on the other end thickened, but I wasn't done. "I used to dream about this moment," I told her, "about you calling, finally realizing you were wrong. Wanting to apologize. But now I see you haven't changed at all. And I don't need your apology. I don't need your approval. And I sure as hell don't need your version of a proper life." She finally spoke, her voice sharp with that old, familiar edge. "You're making a mistake. You'll regret this." I smiled, not because it was funny, but because I finally understood. "No. The only thing I regret is ever wanting your love in the first place." And I hung up. Just like that, the weight I'd been dragging for most of my life let go. My hand trembled slightly as I set the phone down, but it wasn't fear or sadness. It was release. That call didn't shake me. It confirmed everything I already knew. I was never going back. Not for her, not for him, not for anything. A few weeks later, the Monroe Center held a small event to celebrate its 3rd anniversary. Kids were painting murals, a few were practicing acoustic songs in the corner, and Valerie had made way too many cookies like always. Aaron stood next to me, his guitar strapped across his chest, watching the crowd with a grin that didn't need explanation. "You know they'd hate this," he said. "Every single part of it." I laughed. "Good." Valerie came over and wrapped her arms around both of us, beaming. "You two have built something amazing. I hope you know that." I looked around at the space we created, this colorful, warm, imperfect, beautiful place full of kids who didn't have to prove their worth to belong. And for the first time in my life, I didn't wonder what my parents would think. I didn't care. I didn't need their love because I had something stronger. I had a family I chose. A future I built. And standing there in the heart of it all, I realized I wasn't broken. I was exactly where I was meant to be.